One of the scariest things for new options traders is trading naked short options. So when we talk about naked short options, we're talking about selling a short call or a short put and it not being covered in some way, covered with either cash or the underlying long shares or short shares of stock, or spreading it off with another long option to cap the loss on the short option. So anytime you have a naked call or a naked put or some combination strategy like a strangle, which involves both a naked call and a naked put, or an option strategy that contains multiple legs, but one of the legs is an uncovered naked short put or short call, those are what we call undefined risk strategies, because we're not really sure what the maximum possible loss on that strategy, especially the naked call. Your theoretical loss on a naked call is infinity because the underlying stock can rise to infinity, right? We're really not sure what that maximum possible loss on a naked short call is. On a naked short put, it's not necessarily undefined risk because we know what the maximum possible loss on it is. The stock falling all the way to zero would actually be the maximum possible loss, but that would be such a catastrophic loss. We also call naked short puts also undefined risk strategies, just because that maximum loss, even though it's technically not undefined, it's such a big loss, it might as well be undefined. Now, these undefined risk strategies, they're also called unlimited risk strategies. These things can be really scary, especially if you're a new options trader. But honestly, there's some things you can do to actually limit the risk. You can actually define your risk a little bit, even on these undefined risk strategies. So let me switch over to my trading platform. I'm using TASTYTRADE for my trading platform. I'm going to go to Google because I don't currently have a Google position open. So let's go to the options chain for Google. I'm going to go to 46 DTE and let's choose a naked short option. Let's start with the put. So let's imagine I sell this 17 Delta short put here in Google. Now that is what we call an undefined risk trade, but it's not truly undefined because again, the risk is actually Google dropping all the way to zero, which would incur a maximum loss of nearly $14,000. That's such a big loss because, risk reward, my maximum reward on the trade is the credit received for selling the option. Of course, that's always your max reward on a short option. It's the credit received. So I'm going to receive $173, but what's my maximum loss? $14,000. Is that good risk reward? No, but honestly, you're rarely ever going to face a situation where you sell a short put on something and the stock goes all the way to zero. It means the company went bankrupt. And in that case, you just really hit the lottery as far as bad luck goes, unless you're one of those people that are just really trading a lot of garbage companies. If you're trading standard products that most options traders trade, really liquid companies that are very popular, those things are probably not going out of business, in the next 46 days. Because the $14,000 max loss, theoretical max loss, even though that is the theoretical max loss, but that's not a realistic number. A much more realistic number is the buying power reduction, because that is what the broker really considers a realistic max loss, because that is what they want you to set aside to make sure you can cover a really bad position should this go against you. And right now, my broker only wants $1,600 for a buying power reduction. So $1,600 is a much more realistic max loss on this trade. Now, for some traders, $1,600, that's still a big loss, especially I'm only getting $172 credit. So basically, I'm risking 10 to make one, right? That 10-to-1 ratio there, is that good as far as risk to reward? Well, that depends on you. That's a personal choice you have to make. But what I will say is if the max loss numbers scare you, for one thing, if a max loss number scares you, you should strongly consider not making the trade because you're probably trading something a little too big for your account if it scares you. But today, what I really wanted to do, I want to cover 5 things that you can do to really help define your risk and limit your risk on these undefined risk trades, such as short puts, short calls, strangles. Covered calls would also be unlimited risk, undefined risk, because again, it has those shares of stock which can, again, drop all the way to zero, which would be catastrophic for your account. So the first thing I would do is I always set a take profit percentage on all of my trades. I either have it automatically set or I just monitor it daily when I check my positions. For example, right now I have the strangle right here in XBI. So that is a combination of a short call and a short put sold at the same time and the same expiration, at different strikes. And what I could do is I could right click here in TASTYTRADE and I can do close profit percentage, and it defaults to 50%, but that's fine. That's typically what I default to, is I take profits at 50%. I'm going to go ahead and review and send that order, and it's going to have this working order, this resting order that's just going to sit here forever as long as that trade is going on. If the price of this strangle, the overall price of this strangle, reaches 50% of its maximum possible profit, the trade is going to automatically close for me. All right, I'm going to lock in that 50% max profit and just move on. And that really limits the possibility of me taking a big loss, a maximum drawdown on a trade. The truth with short options, naked short options, short puts, and short calls is you will almost never take the max drawdown of any undefined risk strategy as long as you close the trade early. One of the ways to close the trade early is to have a profit target. That way, when you hit that 50% profit target, take it off. There's no reason to let that thing keep going all the way to expiration, because the further down the road you get closer to expiration, delta risk greatly increases. Gamma risk, which we talked about on our video about gamma risk greatly increases. And, that's when you see the huge P&L swings up and down on a trade. And that's when you risk taking that maximum loss on a trade. You rarely will take a maximum loss on a trade as long as you close it well in advance of expiration. And that leads me to number 2 that you can do. Other than taking a profit target, you can also set a stop loss. Now, I do not set automatic stop losses. TASTYTRADE, I believe, now offers automatic stop losses. Let me go to this strangle here on XRT. If I right click, I could bracket the trade in some way. I think that includes a stop loss, or that would include a take profit order and a stop loss order at the same time. I never recommend putting on an automatic stop loss. I recommend you monitor the stop loss yourself. What I mean by that is when you sell something, when I sell an option, I always have in my mind, what is the maximum amount of money I want to see a drawdown on this? So if I sell an option for $1, say I sell a naked short put and I receive $1 credit, then in my mind, I don't want to lose more than 2x or maybe 3x of that initial credit received. So if I don't want to lose more than 2x of the initial credit received, if I ever get to a point where I'm down $200 on the trade that I initially received $100 credit for, then that's my stop loss, my mental stop loss. I'll go ahead and close the trade myself. I'm not going to set any kind of automatic stop losses because those things can be a little dangerous. Plus, they're not always guaranteed to work. If a stock has a big gap down, for example, your automatic stop loss really doesn't matter because it's going to just blow past your stop loss anyway. Who knows where you'll eventually get stopped out. For me, if you want to keep a stop loss, just keep a mental stop loss. It should always be the same number. So if you want to do a 2x or a 3x of initial credit received kind of stop loss, that's fine. And that also gets you out of a trade early. A trade that's going against you, it gets you out of the trade early. And again, it probably will prevent a lot of those possible maximum drawdown situations. The third thing you can do, again, to get out of a trade early, which again always helps you avoid the maximum loss on a trade, is simply always get out of your trades at 21 DTE or whatever it is you set. You should always get out of your trades well before expiration. So if I go back to this Google trade, this possible short put in Google, I'm putting it on at 46 DTE. I'm going to just go ahead and in my mind, I know at 21 DTE, whether it's a winner or a loser, whatever it happens to be, I'm closing that position or I'm rolling that position. And that's it. Because at 21 DTE, the likelihood of that thing already being 100% loser, a maximum possible loser, it's almost 0%, right? That would be a really unlikely event, right? So just, that's 3 different ways to get out of your trade early. Have a take profit percentage, have a mental stop loss, not an automatic stop loss, and then have a DTE mark where you're always getting out of your position, whether it's a winner or a loser. Now let's talk about 2 other ways that you can help cap your potential loss on these undefined risk trades. One thing you can do is you can spread the trade off. And when I talk about spreading it off, what I'm talking about is if you have a naked option, whether it be a naked short put or a naked short call, you can spread it off by turning it into what we call a vertical spread. Is typically what these are called. What that is on a put, what you would want to do is you sell a short put and below it buy a long put. So what the long put is going to do, it's going to cap our loss, right? I can't lose more than the 135 long put, because at that point, this put starts making money, and the money that it's making offsets the money that the short put is losing, right? So that's why that capped that, right? Because without that, it's unlimited risk to the downside, but buying a long put, just caps that downside risk. Now, it's not like that's a free thing to do, right? You had to pay to buy the put. And when you pay to buy that put, right, that reduces your overall credit on the trade. Remember, if I just sold the 140 put, I was selling that for like $1.73. Well, to buy this put, I had to pay some money. So now my total credit received on the trade is only $67. So that's really low credit. And the maximum loss is $434. So I have the potential to make $66 and the potential to lose $434. That's not great risk reward. Typically, when you're doing spreads rather than naked options, you want to bring them in a little bit to make that risk reward a little bit more reasonable. For example, if I bring these strikes in $5, so now I'm selling the 145 put, buying the 140 put. Now my maximum profit is a respectable $106 and the maximum loss is $394. I don't mind that. I don't mind risking 4 to make 1. Ideally, you could bring it in a little further. I'd like to get that to where I'm risking about 3 to make 1. And I can do that if I sell the 150 put and buy the 145 put. Now my max profit, 159, max loss, 341. And that is a very easy to digest defined risk trade. I think even a brand new options trader, just knowing up front, I'm risking essentially $340 to make $160. And even if I don't touch it, we can just let that thing run all the way to expiration. I don't recommend that. But even if I did, I know exactly what I could make and what I could lose. Now, even on a spread, still manage these things early. Managing them early will still help you define your risk. Even though we've already defined the risk, still, if you manage early, you're probably never going to take that max loss of $340 in this case, because you'll get to that thing before you actually reach the max loss, or you'll maybe get 50% of your profit. You get to 50% of your profit, yeah, take it off. There's no reason to let that thing run, because if you let a winner keep running, then it could turn around on you and turn into that max loss. Now, spreading these trades off is not something I typically do on a stock that I'm comfortable trading naked. I much prefer trading naked options rather than spreads. So for Google, for my account, I'm comfortable just selling a single naked put. This 17 Delta short put would be fine for me. But let's pick a stock I would be extremely uncomfortable selling a naked option in. Nvidia, which is currently trading at $900. That's an extremely high price stock. I can't afford this stock because any short call or short put, remember, options represent 100 shares of the underlying contract. Well, 100 shares of Nvidia is $90,000, right? That's a huge buying power requirement if I wanted to go out to, say, the 16 Delta put here. So that would be the 780 strike. You can see the buying power requirement, even on the option. Now I'm getting some margin relief here. It's still nearly 20,000 for buying power requirement. The max loss is $76,000. The only people that could afford to trade naked options on a product as big as Nvidia are people that have, $400, $500, $600,000 minimum probably in their account. So does that mean that nobody can trade a really high price product like Nvidia? No, anybody can trade it, because you can just spread that off, right? You can go ahead and turn this undefined risk trade. We can actually turn it into a defined risk trade by buying a lower strike put, right? Just turning it into a spread. In this case, we're selling the 780, buying the 775. So that is a $5 spread. The $5 spread, there's $500 between the spread. You can think about, $5 is $500. And essentially what you can do is, what is the credit you receive on the spread? Right now I'm receiving $95. That means my maximum loss is $405, because it's the difference between 95 and 500, right? And you can actually see that max profit 95, max loss is 405 essentially. That equals $5. $5 is the width of the spread. If you wanted to see this on the analysis tool, well, I must already have an NVIDIA position on. Let me change this up to where it only shows the position I just put on. There it is. So there is this put credit spread is actually what this is called. It's called a put credit spread because the short put is closest to at the money, and it means that the trade is put on for a credit received rather than a debit received if I had the opposite direction, where the long put is actually closer to at the money. Then this becomes a put debit spread because you actually pay a debit to put on this kind of trade. And of course, all of this can be done with calls as well. So if you wanted to do a short call in NVIDIA, which would be an extremely dangerous thing on a stock that's this high priced, and also a stock that's been doing nothing but going up in price. So here is the chart. I mean, look at this thing. It's gone from, under $200 to nearly $1,000 in the last year. You would never sell a naked short call in this thing. You would be crazy to do so. So if you wanted to actually be bearish in this, instead of just selling a naked short call, you would definitely want to spread that off, right? You definitely want to, in this case, do a call credit spread. And the reason it's called a call credit spread is, again, we're doing this with calls. We're receiving a credit for it because the short call is the one that's closest to at the money. In this case, this is a $10 wide call credit spread. So we're dealing with $1,000 here. I'm receiving a credit of 137, which means my max loss is 863 because 137, 863, that makes up for the 10 points, the $1,000 between the short call and the long call. So that is spreads. Typically, again, I don't trade a lot of spreads. The only time I trade a spread is on really expensive underlyings. Anything more than $200, $300 for a stock price, I'm almost always, if I'm trading it, then I have to do a spread because I can't do naked options because naked options just require too much buying power for my account. The other thing you can do to kind of spread off a trade and define your risk is, let's talk about a covered call, because a covered call is something obviously that we do a lot of if we're doing the wheel trade. So let's imagine I put on a covered call. So I'm going to buy 100 shares of stock. I'm also going to sell a call. I'll sell the 32 delta call in this case. Let's go to the curve tool, the analysis tool, and see the risk profile. The risk profile is essentially exactly the same as a short put, right? So our maximum reward is the credit received, and our maximum loss is, again, the stock going all the way to zero, because these long shares, the 100 shares of stock, right, that is really dangerous. And these things have the potential to lose a ton of money if the underlying stock collapses and goes all the way to zero. One of the most common questions with the wheel or just with covered calls in general is, how do you defend a covered call that starts going against you? Well, kind of like we could spread off those naked options, we can actually do that with the covered call. Now, the covered call has a very similar risk profile to the short put. And remember, we could spread off the short put by buying a lower strike long put. Well, because this is so similar to a short put, we can do the same thing here. I can just go down here and just buy a put. In this case, what I would want to do is I want to see what credit I receive for the call. And whatever I receive for the call, in this case, I received about $3.65 credit. I would spend that same amount, $3.65 credit, on a lower strike put, in this case, a long put. There's nothing exactly that amount, but I'm just going to pick an amount. Now, if I go back to the curve tool, you can see, just like with the short put, buying the long put defined our risk right there at that long put, because that long put starts making money at 145, right? We start making money with the long put, which offsets what we're losing with the covered call. This particular strategy here, where you have a covered call and then you have this protective put, many traders refer to this as a collar because you've kind of defined both your loss and your risk. You really have this narrow range, right? That you can make money and lose money. You can't really make money above 165 because the covered call, you've capped your upside, and now you've capped your downside with the long put. And this is not a trade you typically want to put on as an opening trade. This is really a defensive measure. Like if you're really worried, the news for the underlying stock has been kind of rough and you're not sure what to do, if you just want to go ahead and just give up any potential upside, really, and you're kind of giving up a lot of upside when you also pay for the put, because you've eliminated making any real money on the call because you use the premium for the call to buy the put. But what this is purely a protective measure. This is purely a hedge. when you're kind of worried about the near-term future, you can go ahead and put on that protective put. Again, this is called a collar. So these are 5 things you can do to help define your risk, even with these undefined risk strategies like naked short puts, naked short calls, naked strangles, covered calls. Again, let's review them. You can set a profit target to get out of the trade early. You can set a mental stop loss to get out of the trade early. And you can always get out of the trade early by having a DTE target where you always get out of the trade early, right? You're never going to suffer a maximum loss as long as you get out of the trade early. And you can also spread off those short options with a short put. Just buy a long put at a lower strike. And with a short call, just buy a higher strike long call for your short call, and you spread those things off. You define the risk on the downside for your short put and on the upside for your short call. And the other thing you can do on a covered call, you can go ahead and make a collar. By making a collar, what that is you go ahead and buy a lower strike long put, and then you've capped that downside risk for those shares on your covered call. So hopefully that alleviates some of your concerns with undefined risk strategies. Undefined risk strategies, even though they're undefined risk, again, they're not really undefined risk in most cases, as long as you're doing the right things. If you want to learn more about options trading, specifically the wheel option strategy, which is my favorite option strategy, check out my book, The Super Wheel Option Strategy, available on Amazon. It's available as paperback, hardback, and now in a Kindle edition. Peace, guys.